Hi folks, welcome back. Thank you for watching. Please do hit subscribe if you haven't done so yet. It really does help when you do that. So today folks, I wanted to compare 5 classic vintage 1980s Boss modulation pedals. Now, this intro is going to be a little bit longer than usual today. I'll put a timestamp on screen now if you want to skip straight to the comparison. If that's all you're here for, that's absolutely fine. But this video basically started life as me wanting to compare 3 legendary chorus pedals. So the first ever compact pedal from Boss was the CE-1 Chorus Ensemble. Amazing sounding thing, and arguably the best chorus pedal ever made, even though it was originally designed for keyboards, not guitars, and that does make a difference. I'll talk more about that shortly. But amazing thing, stereo functionality, mains powered, but sounds divine. And I wanted to compare that to its 2 compact-sized successors, the CE-2 and the CE-3. So the CE-2 was essentially, not in terms of circuit, but in terms of sound, designed to be a shrunk-down version of the CE-1 in a smaller format, guitar friendly on the input in terms of impedance, powered by 9 volts to work on pedal boards. So it was designed to be a guitar version of the CE-1. But in shrinking it down, they also got rid of the stereo functionality. It's mono only, and people really miss that. So the CE-3 was designed to be a stereo version of the CE-2. So these 3 pedals here are fairly similar in terms of architecture and sound. But I mentioned I was going to be doing this video in the Q&A video, I think it was somewhere. And a couple of you asked me to include a couple of other legendary Boss modulations. So I'm going to include the DC2 Dimension C, which is kind of similar to those 3 chorus pedals, but it's a little bit different. A chorus pedal works by splitting the input signal into 2. One of those is then modulated using the Bucket Brigade delay chip, and the other is kept completely dry. And it's the modulated signal playing off against the dry signal that creates the kind of wobbly chorus sound we know and love. The DC2 does a similar thing, but it splits the input into 3, and 2 of those signals are modulated in exactly the same way, but one's then flipped out of phase with the other, which is what gives the kind of static, moving without moving, phasey, head in the box type sound we know and love with the Dimension C. So it's similar, but a little bit different. And also I wanted to include the legendary Boss VB-2. Now, as many of you will know, a vibrato pedal is essentially a chorus pedal, but without the dry signal. So you just get the really modulated, pitch bending, sort of wobbly signal, which can sound very seasick in a lot of applications, but it's really cool, especially when used subtly. So they're all kind of derived from the same concept, but they are very different. So this video presents me with a few major problems in terms of comparing these pedals. Firstly, they're incredibly different in terms of architecture, but also in terms of control set. So the Dimension C just has 4 buttons, and what you get is what you get. The other 3 compact pedals separate rate and depth, so you can control them independently. But the CE-1 just has 1 knob marked chorus intensity. So as you turn it up, it gets faster and deeper. So the rate and depth are linked on 1 knob. So I'm never going to be able to dial these in to sound similar, or that similar at least, because they're very different pedals with different control sets. But also, one problem we have to solve is that the CE-1 was designed for keyboards. And on the front end, it has a preamp, which loves to crunch up when you dig in. That's a defining feature of this pedal that isn't in the others. It has that preamp, which will colour the sound. But it's a very low value pot because it was designed for keyboards, which give out a low impedance line level signal. Whereas of course, a guitar is a high impedance signal. So you plug your guitar into here, and that low value pot shelves off all your high end, and it sounds really, really dark. Now, some people really like that sound with the CE-1, but it's not really how it's supposed to sound because it's designed for a low impedance input that will make it sound really bright and sparkly. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to give all of these pedals a buffered signal. Now, I made a video a couple of years ago explaining why this pedal needs a buffered signal. Of course, this is all a compromise though, because if I gave just the CE-1 a buffered signal and not the others, that would skew the results. And giving all 5 a buffered signal, yes, we have consistency, but we might not hear differences on the inputs of the pedals that might filter a high impedance sound in a certain way because we're giving it a buffered signal. So it's all a balancing act, but I think the fairest way of doing it today is to give all 5 pedals an identical buffered signal. But the other thing we need to take into account is these pedals have very different power requirements. So as I just said, the CE-1 is mains powered, you just plug it into the wall, and I think it runs internally at 14 volts from memory. The CE-2, CE-3 and VB-2 all require what we call ACA power, which is really weird, and I'm not entirely sure why Boss did this back in the day, but they did. They need to have a 12 volt input that the pedal then drops internally down to 9 volts. I've no idea why they did that, but that's what they did. So these all require a 12 volt input. However, the DC2 being a slightly later pedal, all of those others are 1981, 82-ish, this is 86. By then they were using PSA power, which is essentially a standard 9 volt input that isn't dropped internally. So I'm going to be giving all of these pedals their correct power today. This will be receiving 9 volts, the other 3 compact pedals will be receiving a 12 volt ACA power input, and of course the CE-1 will be plugged into the wall. So as I said, a very kind of long rambly intro, but I wanted to explain how I'm putting this together today and why there isn't a huge amount to learn aside from looking at differences in headroom and modulation shape and EQ and things like that, because they're all very, very different pedals. But you asked for it, so I'm going to put it together for you today. So I'm going to do this comparison with a selection of different guitars, stacking them into some overdrives as well to see how they behave, and at the end we can have a little chat about what we were hearing today. So without further ado, guys, let's get wobbly. So there we are, folks. Now please do comment underneath, let me know what you were hearing today. Which of those sounds was your favourite? Did you love one pedal but hate another? I love getting your thoughts and opinions in the comment sections. Now, to move through the pedals and talk about what I was hearing at least, the CE-1 is definitely the most coloured sound out of all of them because it has that preamp, which does crunch up as you dig into the guitar, which is why a lot of people love this pedal. It's why some people don't like it as well. It does gain up and clip on the input. You can use this pedal, if you turn the level control all the way up, as an overdrive pedal. You can turn the chorus effect off and use it as a drive pedal. It sounds really cool doing that. But that's one quirk of this pedal. The modulation sounds stunning, but you have, in a non-modified CE-1, you don't have much control over rate and depth with just being the one knob. The vibrato side does split that out, but it's a little bit of a different sound. But fantastic sounding pedal, and we can see why pretty much everyone loves it. The CE-2 does sound pretty close to the CE-1, if I'm honest. It's more, dare I say the word, transparent. It doesn't have that preamp colouring the sound. It has more headroom overall. It's quite a sort of fat and authoritative chorus sound, but it's one we all know and love. It's a great sounding pedal, and if you can get one of these really old ones, they sound amazing. Now the CE-3, two differences I was hearing between this pedal and the others. Firstly, it seemed to be a little bit thinner in the low end and a bit more kind of sparkly up top. It sounded more stereotypically 80s. It sounds more kind of produced in a way, but it's really, really nice. The other thing I was hearing was this pedal was slightly quieter than the other two. Now, I did a bit of reading online. I thought it might just be a quirk of this particular unit, but the CE-3 has been well known. When they reintroduced the stereo circuitry, it created a level drop that they never really fixed. Now, there are mods you can do to this pedal. I think it's just snipping out a resistor or something. You know, it's not really an issue for me. But by having the signal quieter, by definition, the signal to noise ratio was a little bit worse. So this pedal was definitely the noisiest out of the CE-1, CE-2 and CE-3. But it's a great sounding thing, and these are really hidden gems on the vintage pedal market because they sound fantastic. They've got a brilliant chipset in them, but they go for a fraction of the price of a good vintage CE-2. So if you can grab these for, you know, £50, £60 maybe. So they're a really good way into the vintage chorus world because everybody wants the CE-2 and especially the CE-1. Nobody really cares about the CE-3, even though it sounds really nice. Now, moving on to the Dimension C, very different sound. You've got the 4 buttons, so you can't really adjust anything. But I love this pedal. And to be honest, you know, I get asked in the comment sections what's my favourite when I do a comparison. I think it's this. I love the Dimension sound. I've only had this for a couple of weeks, but man, it is just the most inspiring sound. And I quite like that you just get the buttons. You don't get option paralysis. I mean, you only get 2 knobs on some of those pedals, but you just push a button and go. There is something about the EQ of this pedal and the way it kind of sounds. I absolutely love it, especially in the higher settings, because having the 2 signals out of phase with each other, it's extreme, but it doesn't sound like you're at the seaside like some of the other pedals can. So probably my favourite out of the 5, to be honest. Now, of course, the VB-2 is very, very different because it just has the pitch bending sound, no dry signal. It sounds much more obvious as an effect. So I kept the depth, you know, about 10 o'clock and below today because that's where it kind of most closely matched the others. And the rate with it at about 10 o'clock as well was the same as like the rate on the CE-2 maxed out. So it has a much kind of greater range in terms of the controls on this pedal, so I kept them as close to the others as I could today. But an amazing sounding pedal. It has probably the least headroom out of the others, aside from the preamp in the CE-1, and I think that's because we don't have the dry signal in there. So you just have the sound that's going through the BBD, which are typically quite crunchy sounding, but that's hidden by having the dry signal in there in the other pedals. You just have that, so it does get a little bit crunchy, but I still love it. It sounds amazing, and especially kept subtle-ish. It has a lovely high end on it that I've never really found in any other vibrato pedal. Most of them sound quite dark and rolled off up top, but this one really doesn't. It sounds magical. So there we are, folks. Now, these pedals here do have, some of them have stereo functionality. The CE-2 and the VB-2 Vibrato are just mono. If you would like me to put together another video exploring them in stereo and maybe running the VB-2 wet-dry to create a stereo effect, that's essentially what the CE-1 and the CE-3 do. They split the dry signal from the modulated signal for a big kind of stereo effect. And I could throw the CE-2 in there as well. It wouldn't be wet-dry, it would be kind of damp dry because the dry signal would be in the wet amp as well. But if you want me to explore the kind of these sounds in stereo, drop it in the comments and I'll put that video together if there's enough interest in it. But for now, thank you ever so much for watching, folks. As I said, drop your comments below. I love chatting nerdy guitar stuff with you folks in the comment sections, and please do carry on subscribing. I know I always say it, but it makes a huge difference when you do that. So thanks, folks. I hope this video was interesting and useful for you, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.